ticks, it'll keep its coherence much closer. So let's change that to ticks again. So you can see you've got a lot of particles being birthed there on the surface. So the next thing we'll do is we assign a material static material, which you can see is called glow steady. If we have a look in the material editor of what we've actually got here, you can see we've got a bunch of different materials. We've got glow up, glow down, glow steady, and white. So if we look at the maps in each material, that gives you an idea of what it does. This you can see is a self-luminous material. It's just white. It's got no maps. So that's all it does. It just glows the particles white. This material is called glow steady, and again you can see there are no maps. And in this case, you can see it's got an opacity of 30. This one has an opacity of 100, but this one has an opacity of 30, and that's because it's using additive color. So in other words, what we're doing here is we've got particles at a certain brightness, and they're just adding up on top of each other to produce this kind of glowing flame kind of effect. This is very similar to things that we've seen in other effects in this DVD. We've got glow down, and in this case we can see we've got a particle age map here for the color. You can see it starts off being very bright and then deteriorates over time down into this red color. And you can see in self-illumination we've got this gradient here. You can see the particles start off as completely self-luminous, and then they go down to being completely non-self-luminous at the bottom. They've got an opacity of 90, and they're using additive color. So again, we're using this additive effect, and we're using this self-luminosity decrease to actually make the particles fade out. So that's why the material is called glow down. Glow up, as you can imagine, is working in the opposite direction. So our particles start off being orange, and then they work their way up towards being white. So they become very hot and very bright looking. And again, you can see we start off our particles as being semi-transparent, and then they become more opaque as they gain age. So those are the materials that we're actually using. So you can see in the first event we're using this material static, and we're using glow steady. Now glow steady is this material here, so you can see we're actually just creating this sort of orangey glow kind of effect. We then position our particles on this text object, and we're using text this is, which I just showed you. That was the shape object we just looked at. And the option we're using is surface, so we're actually placing our particles on the surface of that object. Now because it's a shape, the surface is basically the shape, so that's why it produces this kind of outline effect. If we wanted to, if we put an edit mesh on that shape and that turned it into a mesh, and we actually had vertices inside the shape, then obviously our particles would be placed within the volume of the letters as well, if that was something that we wanted to do. We then rotate our particles randomly, and you can see that this is very similar to lots of other events that we've seen in the other effects, but the orders here are actually backwards compared to a lot of them. In most of the DVD's chapters, we've created the tetra, then we've rotated it, or we've positioned particles, then added a tetra, then we've rotated it, then we've applied the material. So you can see that these operators in this particular circumstance aren't really very sensitive to which order they're put in. There's no real sort of precedence which is needed. Each one does a completely separate thing and doesn't really rely on the last. You can apply a material to your particles, as you can see here, even when they haven't got a shape. It's not going to have any effect, but the material will be applied. You can assign a position to the particles even though they haven't got a shape, or you can assign a shape to the particles even if they haven't got a position. So those two kind of operators, they can be in any real order really. Rotation, again, it's completely independent from if there's a shape assigned or whether the particles have a position. They can have a rotation given to them even though they've got no position in space. That's perfectly possible to do. But you can see that if we turn off position, all the other operators in this event really have no relevance because our particles don't have a position in the scene. I'll turn on position and I'll turn off rotation. You can see that doesn't have a visible effect. But at render time it would, because all our little tetrahedra would obviously all be aligned with world space. And that would look very repetitious. You'd have these little tiny pyramids all aligned, and that can look, it can give, as I said, it can give weird artifacts. Look, you've got a lack of randomness there, and as I said, that often gives away the fact, this is computer graphics. Okay, so then we got an age test. So when our particles reach age 10, this is completely arbitrary. In this case, it's just, this is the way I want the effect to look. After 10